When did you discover that rewards arrive for those who are patient? I discovered that rewards arrive for those who are patient during the 3 years. I quietly amassed proof against my spouse, who was gradually contaminating me. Not the rapid lethal type, but the gradual variety that leaves you ill and reliant, where no one takes you seriously when you attempt to explain that something's amiss. The sort that leads everyone to assume you're going insane, while he acts the role of the loving partner. It began with minor issues roughly a year after we tied the knot. Head pains following meals, digestive problems that appeared and vanished, vertigo that struck unexpectedly, exhaustion that no rest could remedy. Initially, I figured it might be tension or an odd infection, but it only intensified. Physicians repeatedly suggested nervousness or irritable bowel syndrome, or perhaps it was purely psychological. Austin would clasp my hand at checkups, appearing deeply troubled, informing them of his anxiety for me, how I'd occasionally become disoriented, even suspicious, how he now oversaw all our money matters since my mental haze had grown so severe. I'd been involved with Austin for 7 years, wedded for 4. All thought he was ideal, attractive, accomplished, tolerant. They'd remark on my fortune in having a man who looked after me during illnesses, handled affairs when I was unable. Our acquaintances would note how he never grumbled, how he'd scrap outings to remain with me at home when I felt unwell. What a hero, they'd comment. What an exemplary spouse. Yet something seemed off. In his absence, I'd improve, actually physically improve. During his business trips, I'd genuinely recover. My head aches would diminish. My gut would calm. Then he'd return, and in a matter of days I'd be lightheaded, frail, unable to recall discussions we allegedly held. Missing chunks of time as if my mind had shut down, rousing foggy when I had no memory of dozing off. The initial occasion I grew doubtful. I was in the cooking area and spotted him mixing something into my brew when he believed I was in the restroom. I challenged him outright. Huge error. He captured the entire exchange on his device, then shared it with my parent, his folks, our pals Vita and Justin. Me appearing totally deranged, charging my flawless partner with attempting to harm me. You could detect the frenzy in my tone, the urgency, and Austin, so composed, so logical, pleading with me to simply ingest my remedy, noting the physician warned these distrustful spells could occur. Everyone gazed at me with that blend of sympathy and apprehension. Vita drew me aside afterward and murmured, "Perhaps I should eat Austin. Perhaps I did require assistance." Following that, Austin began proposing I consult a mental health specialist. Stated, perhaps I required inpatient care. Kept mentioning, we must consider my well-being. And while I was bent in agony from abdominal distress, he'd caress my locks and murmur that he'd forever care for me regardless. He'd inform others how difficult it was turning, but that he'd pledged vows through illness and wellness, and he'd never forsake me. Everyone respected him further. Unfortunate Austin with his ailing spouse. I realized if I voiced anything once more, he'd turn it against me, render me appear more unhinged, possibly even get me institutionalized. So I bided my time, observed, began discarding beverages when he wasn't watching, ceased consuming anything he cooked, informing my digestion improve a plain fare. So I prepared distinct dishes. But I'd feign eating what he created, then dispose of it when he was away. I purchased detoxifying charcoal pills and consumed them covertly when he was out, concealed them in a feminine product container he'd never inspect. Gradually, I became more robust, sharper. Periods where I could reason clearly for the first time in ages. That's when I became certain. But I required substantiation, not mere doubt. So I converted our spare bedroom into my workspace. Claimed I needed personal areas since my rest was so disrupted. Began resting there most evenings, claiming his breathing noises worsened it all. He disliked it, but couldn't object without appearing domineering to others. I could spot the irritation in his gaze, the scheming. I installed a small recording device, waited months accumulating clips of him entering at night, verify if I was unconscious, introducing something to the hydration container beside my bed. He'd linger there occasionally, simply observing my respiration. Once I recorded him assessing my responses during slumber, squeezing my limb, checking if I'd rouse. Another instance. He positioned a reflective surface near my nostrils as a confirming I was still alive. The expression on his features wasn't worry. It was let down. Once I possessed recorded proof, I dispatched strands of my locks to a testing facility for analysis, paying in currency, utilizing Vita's location. Preserved portions of dishes he crafted especially for me in marked holders stashed in a portable cooler in my vehicle. Recorded all in a diary I stored at Vita's residence. Every indication each time he provided me edibles or liquids, every cognitive slip. I began capturing images of myself each day, monitoring the bodily alterations, the slimming, the jaundiced complexion, the fragile strands. This continued for nearly a year, then another. I performed the role. Feeble spouse, becoming more absent-minded, more reliant. I'd intentionally topple items occasionally or stumble over simple terms during talks when company was present, all while compiling proof during times he assumed I was at counseling sessions. I was consulting an attorney. Learned Austin had acquired additional coverage on my life. Had been discussing my declining psychological condition with my physician, informing co-workers about his unfortunate wife developing premature cognitive decline. I uncovered he'd been investigating signs of arsenic exposure, searching for undetectable contaminants, had been jesting with pals about becoming a single man eventually. The third year proved the toughest. He began inviting his buddy Otto over frequently. Otto, who worked in pharmaceuticals, they'd murmur jointly and halt when I came in. I'd overhear fragments like, develop resistance and could require something more potent. Austin began discussing relocating us to a calmer spot, someplace I could recuperate adequately. Reference how his relative Annie possessed a waterfront property we could utilize, isolated, serene, nobody nearby for distances. Began arranging without my input, informing folks the relocation was for my benefit. Acquired outdoor gear, angling supplies. Remarked to Justin how profound the body of water was, how simple it would be to vanish there. I realized the moment had arrived. I couldn't delay further. But approaching authorities with incomplete proof would pit his statement against mine. The statement of a lady everyone thought was psychologically unwell. My own parent had begun discussing oversight, so I took a reckless step, something hazardous. I welcomed Vita when Austin was preparing supper. I informed her I required her backing, that matters were worsening. She'd been my companion since university prior to Austin. I hoped deep inside she still had faith in me. That evening, Austin prepared his signature dish, the one that invariably left me severely unwell later. I exchanged our servings when he stepped away to respond to the entrance. My pulse racing so intensely, I feared it might burst. I consumed his portion. He consumed the dish he'd made for me. We all sat engaging in casual chat while I anticipated. Vita unaware, Austin grinning that enduring grin. In under 60 minutes, he was bewildered and muddled, fumbling objects, garbling his speech. As Vita observed in shock, Austin couldn't recall the date, couldn't balance upright, kept inquiring why we stared at him that way. I feigned worry, contacted Toxin Hotline, outlined his indicators. They advised rushing him to medical care right away. Vita was already dialing emergency services, alarm in her tone. That's when I placed a diary. The recorded clips, the test outcomes on the surface, revealed everything to VA while Austin remained there, still impaired by whatever he'd added to my meal. Observe her expression as she comprehended it all. The years of deception, the contamination, the gradual, intentional effort to erase me while appearing as a committed partner. By the arrival of medical transport, VA was clutching my hand firmly enough to cause pain. Informed the responders they must check for toxins. Displayed the meal specimens. When they inquired who had cooked the food, I indicated Austin. Informed them there was additional proof. So much additional. The authorities arrived as well. Discovered the containers in his work drawer. Discovered further materials in his vehicle. Discovered queries on his device regarding estate regulations. Undetectable contaminants. Methods for flawless homicide. First update. 21 days have passed since Austin's attention. They retained him in medical care for 3 days to address the contamination and observe his condition. The physician indicated whatever he consumed was an intricate blend. primarily metallic elements and certain drug mixtures that one specialist noted wasn't anything someone could assemble by mistake. I continually reflect on how that might have been me in that treatment bed, how often it nearly was. The authorities questioned me extensively, required me to recount all from the start. They repeatedly asked why I didn't report earlier, why I delayed years rather than weeks. I attempted to clarify how Austin had methodically cut me off, persuaded all I was psychologically unstable, dominated our funds, tracked my activities. The investigator recording didn't appear persuaded until VA intervened, informed them how Austin would rationalize my incidents to all, how he'd display recordings of me behaving erratically at social gatherings as proof of my worsening psychological condition, how he'd instruct all our acquaintances on responses if I began leveling charges. During the home inspection, they uncovered a concealed section in his workspace secure. Within were containers of materials marked with timelines and quantities, a log with entries on my reactions following each administration, as he termed it, sheets of notes on which mixtures induce prolonged rest, which triggered cognitive gaps versus bodily frailty. It was all so scientific, so meticulous, so orchestrated. They uncovered studies on contaminants that imitate organic ailments, documents on undetectable poisons, a dossier with details on Annie's property, including submerged terrain charts, a sealed pouch with heavies. Vad hasn't departed my vicinity. She rests on my sofa currently. States she doesn't feel secure with me solitary after all. She continually expresses regret for not recognizing earlier, for trusting him instead of me. I can't even feel resentment toward her since he deceived everybody. He was so skilled at it, so convincing in his worry, so deliberate in his approach. Austin's relatives appeared at the law enforcement building yelling about baseless claims. His mom, Sydney, maintained I was an emotionally erratic one, that I'd been imagining things and distrustful for ages, kept insisting he was simply attempting to assist me, that any remedies he provided were doctor-approved, demanded to view the proof. When they refused, she began contacting all our contacts, asserting I had framed Austin, that I contaminated him in some distorted vendetta dream, that I was a threat. The initial court appearance occurred yesterday. Austin remained there in his inmate attire, appearing so altered from the person I wed. He avoided direct eye contact, but I could sense his animosity across the space. The state attorney outlined the proof, the recordings, the logs, the analyses, the toxin holders. The magistrate rejected release, deemed him an escape threat and hazard to society. His counsel persistently contended about contaminated proof, about my background of psychological volatility, about how this was merely a miscommunication between a loyal partner and his suspicious wife. That's when they mentioned Otto. The authorities had interrogated him after discovering exchanges between him and Austin, debating mixtures and quantities, and developing resistance gradually. Otto asserted he believed they were discussing vitamins, that he was unaware Austin was contaminating me, stated their talks on drugs were merely hypothetical chats among buddies. The state attorney presented proof that Otto had pilfered remedies from his workplace, had been assisting Austin investigate rare contaminants, had even procured specific compounds using his occupational status. Otto was released on bond, his work permit halted during review, his counsel contending he was influenced by Austin, that he was oblivious to the true intent behind their scholarly exchanges. The aspect that horrifies me is how credible Otto's argument appears, how readily someone might accept that he was merely another casualty of Austin's influence. Just as all assumed I was deranged, they might conclude Otto is blameless. My health results returned last week. Years of minimal exposure contamination has harmed my renal system. My hepatic performance is impaired. I possess brain-related indicators that might never completely fade. The physician stated I'm fortunate to survive, that the quantity of metallic elements in my body ought to have ended me. The sole cause it didn't is because I began covertly ingesting those detox pills. Because I ceased truly ingesting what he offered. Because an instinct in me battled to endure even when I didn't wholly grasp the situation. Justin contacted yesterday at last. He was sobbing, expressing remorse for doubting me. Stated Austin had swayed him I was experiencing mental collapses, that my charges were components of my ailment. Justin conceded Austin had displayed in modified clips of our disputes, combined to render me appear frantic, while Austin seemed serene and sensible. Stated he feels nauseous recalling all the occasions he urged me to follow Austin and consume my remedies. Austin's counsel reached out to mine yesterday. They're constructing a case around my psychological condition, asserting I've suffered from illusory affliction for ages. That Austin was providing approved remedies, since I rejected them willingly. They requested all my health documents, all my counseling records. They're attempting to depict me as the volatile one who framed him from distrustful illusions. My counsel states we must ready for them to become truly vicious, to distort all to render me appear unhinged. I experienced an anxiety episode in the market this morning. Merely standing gazing at tomato sauce and abruptly unable to inhale, kept reflecting on all those suppers, all those dishes he crafted especially for me, all the moments I consumed what he provided, relying on him. Vita discovered me huddled in the passageway, breathing rapidly. A staff member inquired if I required emergency aid, and I simply collapsed, yelling that I wasn't deranged, that I wasn't inventing it. Sydney contacted my parent, swayed her that I'd experienced a mental collapse, that the strain of Austin's attention had driven me to the limit. My own parent appeared with forms for urgent mental assessment, remained in my front room stating she merely desires to aid, that she's concerned for me, that perhaps I require some period in a protected setting to handle it all. VA had to bodily obstruct the entrance when two individuals arrived asserting to be from a mental health center, had to warn of summoning authorities before they departed. My parent sobbing that she merely desires her child returned. The version prior to all this contamination absurdity commenced. The monetary review is another terror. Austin had been transferring funds for ages, minor sums into profiles I was oblivious to, had been covertly disposing of our holdings, converting to liquid. The investigator managing the economic violations aspect states it seems he was preparing to vanish, had been establishing a departure plan far prior to my discovery. They uncovered proof he'd been examining nations lacking repatriation pacts, had been communicating with an individual regarding fresh identity materials, possessed a ready pack concealed in his workspace containing currency. Yesterday, they located an additional device in Austin's vehicle, numbers I'd never encountered. Exchanges individuals I'm unfamiliar with debating the scheme and schedule and ensuring it appeared spontaneous. Exchanges of Otto regarding elevating quantities and hastening the schedule. Exchanges to Logan, a title I'd never encountered previously, regarding resolving unfinished matters and managing the Vita matter. The authorities are attempting to track this Logan individual. I can't slumber without envisioning Austin hovering above my resting place, observing my breaths. Can't consume without questioning if there's an additive in my nourishment. Vita handles all our cuisine currently, but occasionally I still can't force myself to ingest. Shed another 5 pounds this week. The counselor I'm consulting labels it PTSD. States, my system remains in defense state. Indicates, it could require considerable time before I sense secure once more. Tomorrow, we possess a session with the state attorney. They desire me to recount all anew in order, aim to confirm their argument is impenetrable. My attorney states they're anxious about the psychological condition approach Austin's group is advancing. Anxious a panel might get influenced by the mourning partner tale, by the concept that he was simply attempting to support his distressed spouse. They require me to appear sturdy, reliable, trustworthy. But how do you sway outsiders of an occurrence that appears so improbable? How do you verify you're sane when an individual devoted years to convincing all you aren't? Austin's folks have submitted a request for oversight over him, asserting he's been improperly affected by me for ages, that I've been emotionally tormenting him, directing him. They're insisting he requires shielding from me even during his imprisonment. The utter __ absurdity of it would be comical if it wasn't so alarming. They've engaged a mental health expert who's ready to declare that Austin shows indicators of being a target of dominating influence, that he might have operated under compulsion, under my authority. The total reversal of truth is astonishing. The authorities still haven't tracked Otto. He skipped his appointment with his oversight agent yesterday. His residence was emptied. His vehicle discovered deserted at a transit point. The investigator contacted this morning stating they're widening the pursuit. that he's now viewed as an evader, that I ought to remain vigilant, remain accompanied, notify any unusual events, as though I haven't been practicing that for ages already, as though my whole being hasn't transformed into a practice in extreme awareness. I reflect on what might have transpired if I hadn't bided, if I'd approached authorities sooner, with incomplete proof, if I'd attempted to escape lacking verification. Austin would have tracked me, would have swayed everyone I was undergoing crisis, would have got me confined, or more severely, would have transported me to that residence, to those profound, shadowy depths, to that heavy sealed pouch. Second update. Nearly 3 months have elapsed since my prior report. So many events. I'm uncertain where to commence. Austin's legal proceedings commenced last week finally. His counsel continually mentions my record of emotional unsteadiness and distrustful habits. Continually describes Austin as this loyal partner, driven to the limit by his spouse's worsening state. The state attorney displayed the recordings I captured. Austin hovering over me during rest, assessing if I'd stir, introducing materials to my edibles, my liquids, my remedies. The whole judicial chamber fell quiet, observing him systematically pollute my hydration vessel, then linger there observing, anticipating. This expression on his features that wasn't anxiety, but something chilly. His counsel attempted to contend the recordings lacked context, that Austin was verifying my respiration due to concerns over my medical states, that he was incorporating approved remedies to my liquids since I rejected them. It's frightening how reasonable he renders it. They located Otto 2 weeks prior concealed at Annie's residence, the identical location Austin had intended to transport me, the identical location with the vast depths and 0 observers. Otto collapsed amid interrogation, confessed all, how he'd been providing Austin with drug items, how they'd investigated contaminants jointly, determined quantities that would trigger indicators without ending me right away, how Austin had discussed speeding the process, about ensuring it seemed organic when it ultimately occurred. Otto's account is crushing, but his counsel is already negotiating an agreement, asserting he was manipulative,